Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
No one thinks we have the balls to pull this off.
Okay, girls. Let's go get 'em.
There's no place like home.
Hello and welcome to Girls on Film, the film review show from a female perspective. My name's Anna Smith. I'm a film critic, broadcaster and host of the Girls on Film podcast. This is our third YouTube episode with the BFI. As you probably know, Girls on Film champions the work of women in film. My guests range from female filmmakers to actors and activists and composers and critics, and we look at movies of all ages through a female lens. Here's what we have in store for you today. Rosamund Pike is forthright about female genius. Maxine Peake shares her journey to feminism. StreetDance 3D star Nichola Burley chats about motherhood and her latest role. And the great Amma Asante talks about directing and the Black Lives Matter movement. Our guests are going to be talking about some new releases and sharing their thoughts on recent events, but I'd also like to first recommend to you 3 films that are currently showing on the BFI player that are close to my heart. The first one comes from director Céline Sciamma, who gave us the wonderful Portrait of a Lady on Fire. It is girlhood, or bande de filles. Before Portrait of a Lady on Fire came along, Céline gave us this very different film. Girlhood is an energetic streetcast drama about a teenager who joins a girl gang in the suburbs of Paris. Next up is My Brother the Devil. Sally El-Hosaini's film tells the story of 2 British Egyptian brothers living in Hackney. It's a gritty, gripping take on the crime genre and an impressive debut from El-Hosaini. Finally, I really recommend you check out a film called Pilly. You might not have heard of it, but it's a subtle, slow-burning drama from Leanne Wellham set in Africa. It's about an HIV-positive woman who's determined to take her future into her own hands. My first guest came to fame on TV in shows including Dinner Ladies and Shameless, and she's since been in some great films like The Falling and Funny Cow. She's now starring in Fanny Lye Deliver'd alongside Charles Dance, Freddie Fox and Tanya Reynolds. She is Maxine Peake. Well, Maxine Peake, welcome back to Girls on Film.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, it's lovely. Well, we last met in Manchester at the wonderful Home Cinema on episode 15 for the film Gwen, which is a wonderful, evocative period film. And now you're in another one, which is extraordinary, Fanny Lye Deliver'd. This spans so many genres, from folk horror to home invasion drama to psychosexual thriller, and it tackles some really fascinating themes. What appealed to you about this script by director Thomas Clay?
I think initially it was the period. To be honest, when my agent said you're getting a script and it's set just after the English Civil War, and I've always been fascinated by that sort of period in history, and mainly about the history I didn't learn at school, which was about the ranters and the diggers and the levellers and the big sort of grassroots political movements that were happening then. And then when I read it, obviously Fanny Lye Deliver'd, so you realise that the lead character is a female, which, is still slightly unusual, especially in this genre. And I just thought it was a really beautiful piece of writing. I thought the script was fascinating. I just thought the sort of development and emancipation of Fanny really struck with me, about her journey throughout the film. So that was one of the reasons that I said, yeah, okay.
This book interests you greatly, doesn't it?
No. I mean, scripture ain't for a woman to touch.
Pious nonsense. See? What says that?
Oh, I don't know.
J-O-H-N. John. It's your husband's name. And that?
That says John as well.
Right. See? That's so difficult, is it?
You're wasting your time, Mr. Ashby. I'm far too set in my ways.
You are as you feel yourself to be.
I feel like the film explores what makes a woman become a liberated feminist in a way, from terrible traumatic experiences to revelatory experiences. So she's badly mistreated by men and then she's given hope by people who evangelise about equality. And that sort of felt quite timeless to me. How did that chime with your own experience of being a feminist or becoming a feminist?
Well, I think and it's interesting because I think when I read the script, I felt that, Thomas and Rebecca's character, when I was reading the script, had brought this opened a new world of possibilities, of political possibilities. But actually in the film, I started to realise that Thomas was just another, member of the patriarchy who had his own issues and his own ego. And it was actually through feeling somebody was given an open door, then going, actually, no, the only way I can do this is on my own. That patriarchy, wherever, will still be there. It was still about his needs as a man and his ego and arrogance. And then I think when obviously there was another female, Rebecca's character, that she felt she had some duty of care to as well. It was like, we've got to get out of here. We're just getting, however we feel this man maybe offering us an enlightened future, he's not. So I feel it's about finding it from in yourself. That's what's really struck me.
Well, there's a brilliant scene where Freddie Fox's character Thomas basically sort of mansplains feminism in a way to your character Fanny, and I think that's the pivotal point for me, where you start to go, hold on a minute, she needs to do this for herself, not just be told. There are a lot of dramatic, violent scenes in this film. What was the most challenging scene to film, or among the most challenging?
It's interesting, really. I mean, the violence, because they become so technical, those scenes. There's sometimes, I know I don't want to, debunk the myth of filmmaking, but they can become quite comical, when there's people with blood, squirting, somebody's behind going, not enough blood, and you're trying desperately to. And Peter Guinness, and Perry Fitzpatrick, they were, they're such great guys and such good fun. But to be honest, I think probably the scene there's a sort of sex scene within it. There's when she enters into a union with Thomas and Rebecca, and I think that was quite difficult. We've got Tanya Reynolds, who's amazing, but this was her first job. And she threw herself into it and was fantastic. But, so the three of us, at different varying degrees of experience, but all quite nervous about and what that scene would say. You had to tread a very fine line that it doesn't become gratuitous or titillating. All the time it was treading that very fine line with the film that's sometimes more difficult than those, when you're butchering 7 people with a kitchen knife,
Now, you've done several period dramas, from Peterloo to Funny Cow, and now this one. How do you get in the right frame of mind for a certain period? Are you at all method? Do you do a lot of reading?
I'm not method. I'm anti-method. I have a method. No, I think every actor has a method. Some actors just like to show you their method a bit more than others. I do have a method. Every actor has a way that they prepare. And for me, it's lots of research, lots of reading, lots of watching films, documentaries, just absorbing as much as you can of the period. And I find that fun. It's got to be fun. That's when I think sometimes I'm not anti-method, but it's when people bring it onto a production or onto a set and it's not fun, and it's not fun for everyone else around. Acting is play.
And now you starred in Carol Morley's amazing coming-of-age movie, The Falling. What are your memories of filming that? Because it's quite a significant piece, I think, certainly for me.
Yeah, well, I was very fortunate because I'd worked with Carol a few times. I'd done her first feature, Edge, and I'd done a couple of short films with Carol. And I'd seen Carol's alcohol years when I was younger and just fell in love with the film. And then very bizarrely, one day my agent rung and said, it was my old agent, rung and said, somebody called Carol Morley wants you to do a short film. But I'd been offered 3 episodes of quite a popular, I'd say children's TV series. And I'd said, I'd rather, I want to work with Carol more, which didn't go down too well. Because I knew she was, I don't mean going places but I knew she was a true artist and an author, and I thought she's going to continue doing exciting, groundbreaking work, and this is, the kind of people I want to be working with and associated with. But yeah, it was great fun. Carol's she's a fabulous director, but she's a fabulous human, and her energy just, sort of sort of fuses through a set.
And you've been busy filming as well, because you've been the Alan Bennett Talking Heads, is that right?
Yes, I actually filmed on the EastEnders set, you know, under strict guidelines. It was on her, you did your own hair, you did your own hair and makeup.
And who's your character?
The piece I'm in is called Miss Fozzard Finds a Feat. So I play Miss Fozzard, and it's about her trips to a cropadist, and also sort of a relationship with a brother who's very poorly. So throughout her sort of monologue, you start to realise what's really happening at home, and then this relationship that starts with this cropadist, and how that... It's a similar story of a woman finding enlightenment, actually, and yeah, it's interesting because she says one of the lines, I'm not a feminist, but, and then by the end you think, actually, you really are now. You've really... you know, you've taken hold of your own destiny and done what you wanted to do. So, yeah, it was a great piece. I'm very funny, as Alan Bennett is. He's a genius. So.
When do you think you first said, I'm a feminist? What age do you think you were?
You know, I never actually, somebody said I was a feminist. That's when I started saying I am a feminist. I was always very much, I'm a socialist. And as, you know, maybe naively, but as far as I'm concerned, that's an umbrella that, you know, covered a lot of points. And I didn't want to say I was a feminist because at the time I was like, what am I actually doing? You can't just say you're an ist if you're not doing something. And I thought, am I actually proactive in the movement? What am I doing? That's how I feel. I'm not saying that's the written rule, and I know people will argue with me. And it doesn't, you know, even if you're doing tiny things, if you feel you're, you know, moving forward to help, you know, so it was only when somebody said to me, oh, you're a feminist, that then I started to... It's like most things, I only say I'm something when somebody... Which is a bad thing, which is actually not a feminist thing. It's when somebody says, you are this, and you go, oh, am I? Okay. Because sometimes...
Validation.
Yeah, which is wrong. Yeah. You need... Your validation come from yourself, not outside.
Well, an important feminist thing you've done recently is the film for Refuge.
Yes,
Talk to me a little bit about that. I watched that earlier, and it's a very powerful piece about domestic violence during lockdown.
Actually, it started with Steve Reeves, the director, who I did a film called Keeping Rosie with. And he got in touch. And I've done various things over the years with Refuge. And I first was introduced to them when I did a TV series called Criminal Justice, which was about a woman who was being abused by her husband. You know, he was a barrister played by Matthew McFadden. They lived this sort of on paper, very idyllic sort of middle-class existence. And I went to meet Lisa King, who's sort of the head of Refuge, and we talked, you know, I did it for research, and we talked about various case studies and blah, blah, blah. And then when Steve got in touch, and I thought, well, it's Steve Reeves, who I absolutely adore, and Refuge, that I think is such an important, you know, organisation, and obviously knowing that domestic violence was on the rise in lockdown. I mean, there's no other way, you know, it was obvious that there's going to be a catalyst of people being, you know, sort of hemmed in together. And I said, yes, of course. And then the script sort of came through, and then, you know, Steve said to me, who would you like to play the husband? And I said, well, I've got this fabulous friend called Lex Shrapnel. I said, I think would be great, because I don't think he's be obvious as what an abuser is, because that's the thing, they're not obvious, you know. And I think sometimes in film and television we can be sort of signalled. But I'm also a patron of a refuge in Bolton called Fort Alice, and just the amazing work they do. And I'm always surprised by the women that you meet who have been in this situation, and it's never obvious. I think, again, on film and television, they can usually be paid as people as shrinking violets or physically very weak, and I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but some of the women you meet, you would never, you know, it can affect anybody at any time. And there's just more awareness about actually what that abuse is. You know, you just hope little things you can do. You know, I'm an actor, you know, what, but if you can get involved with small things and help in little ways.
Now, to wrap up, obviously we're living in weird times, but you are one of the most popular guests on Girls on Film. Our listeners and now viewers love you. Do you have any message for the Girls on Film viewers?
Well, just to say, there's a lot of pressure put on, and especially, you know, if you look on social media, everybody's doing something. Hey, I've written a film, or I've written a script, or I've you know, made this, or I've done that, or I've started doing, you know, great, that's great, keeping yourself busy. But as well, it's not feeling guilty if you've just taken this time to sit and think. You know, I feel very fortunate. You know, I've not, nobody I know has been, you know, seriously ill. I've had friends who've been poorly, you know, and, you know, I feel very blessed. But it's still strange times for everybody, and it affects people in very different ways. So just look after yourselves and don't feel any pressure. You do what you do. That's all you can do, and just be true to yourself.
Well, it's so lovely to have you back on Girls on Film, and congrats again on Fanny Lye Deliver'd.
Thank you very much.
Lovely to see you.
Take care, all the best.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.
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 Fanny Lye Deliver'd is available to rent across digital platforms, including on the BFI player, from the 26th of June. Talking Heads starts tonight on BBC One, and you can see all 12 films on the BBC iPlayer. To find out more about Refuge, go to refuge.org.uk. Now, during lockdown, the BFI have been working harder than ever to bring films into your homes. So if you're enjoying this show, please show your support for the BFI by making a small donation. You can give £5 by texting BFI at home to 70085. It costs a £5 plus one standard message rate. Thanks for your support. My next guest began as a stage actress, and she's since become a Hollywood star, appearing in films from Die Another Day to Gone Girl. I've always been really impressed by her choices in independent films as well, like the Marie Curie biopic Radioactive, which is available to download now. She is Rosamund Pike. So, Rosamund Pike, welcome to Girls on Film.
Thank you.
Well, we're here to talk about Radioactive, and congratulations, because what a phenomenal film, and Marie Curie was an extraordinary woman. What were the joys and the challenges of playing her for you?
I think, you know, one of the things that is such a pleasure is the thought that people who see the film are going to discover Marie Curie for the first time, because I expect that most people will know her name and actually, if pushed, would have very little idea of exactly how much she achieved. I think very few people will know she won 2 Nobel Prizes in her lifetime. Many people might not know she was Polish, because she chose to change her name from Maria Sklodowska to Marie, her first name to Marie, when she moved to France and married Pierre Curie. She sort of opted to lose, a lot of that connection to her country and her name. People might not know she had a daughter who also won a Nobel Prize, or that the very term that is, so familiar to us, the concept of radioactivity, was her discovery. She revealed that mystery and phenomenon to the world and actually coined the term radioactivity. I think people will be blown away by her. But on top of all of that, she was a woman in another century, working against tremendous odds to completely change the world. I mean, her and her husband changed the course of the 20th century.
I've run the same test 6 times. I get identical results. My instinct is that there is another element that's skewing the results.
You think you found an undiscovered element?
If you're laughing at me, then I'm...
No, I'm not laughing at you. That's exciting. Your measuring equipment's useless.
It's worked perfectly fine for me so far.
If we're going to get the figures you need, we need something that's capable of extreme precision.
There is no we.
You need something that's capable of measuring microscopic aspects of
No,
energy.
please,
yes,
no.
And I have an idea. Follow me.
It's an incredible story, and I certainly learnt a lot. And we interviewed the director Marjane Satrapi in episode 28 of Girls on Film, and she said when a man is a genius, he's allowed to be difficult, and that's okay. But when it's a woman, it's a different story, and I think the film really sort of says that.
That's absolutely true. So many films have been made by the tortured male, about the tortured male genius, and so much rope is given to a man who's a genius to be difficult. He's of course he's going to be like that. He's a genius. And then here we make a film about Marie Curie, and the same old criticism gets lobbed at her. Oh, why was she such a bitch? Why was she... Excuse me? I said that to a French journalist. He said, I don't understand. He said, even after all her success, she was still kind of a bitch. And I said, wow. I said, that says so much more about you than about Marie Curie. I said, because to me, she's not a bitch. To me, she's direct, she's obstinate, she's ambitious, she speaks her mind, takes no prisoners, but she's not a bitch. She's just, I suppose, leading with her brain rather than her charm.
Exactly.
And I actually happen to find it charming. That's what's so puzzling to me, because I find her sort of oddity and directness, I find it eccentric and kind of charming. I do.
We're interviewing a number of candidates, and we thought due consideration should be given to you taking the post.
And if I don't want the post?
Then that is one less candidate for us to consider.
I'd wish to be considered on my own merits. If you wish to give it to me out of pity, don't. If you wish to give it to me to follow some agenda or other, don't.
Well, what say you...
I have nothing else to say. It is not a job I want, but it is a job I will take. And if my science doesn't speak for itself with regard to my quality, then you have gravely misunderstood my science.
That brings us to other roles you've had, like A Private Law, in which you played journalist Marie Colvin. Is there something liberating in playing women who are unconventional and really just do life their own way?
I think there's definitely something liberating about playing a woman who doesn't have to lead with charm. You know, as we know, the looks of a woman is the surface. And what the really interesting stuff is when you go beyond that. Sure, we can all admire beauty and we can all, see an attractive face and like it, but the real interest, the real reason we're drawn to people is way deeper than that. And I don't care whether people find these women attractive. Some people will, some people won't. But I think, no one will fail to admire them for their courage, for their, carving of a new path, for their outspokenness, for their sort of willingness to speak the truth to power, to sort of disrupt the traditional structures. And I think, it's interesting with science being so much to the fore again with the current crisis. I'm wondering, how many girls will decide to go into science as a result of this crisis.
Do you feel a connection with the historical characters that you've played? Do you kind of feel a bit of a link to them somehow emotionally long after the event?
I do. It's a good question. I think there's a particular relationship you have when you take on the responsibility for playing someone who actually lived. Because in a way that you sort of meditate on their life in a very deep and profound way. You read everything there is to read about them, or you watch every piece of footage there is, you look at every photograph that was taken of them. You sort of, you have this silent, communication with them beyond the grave in a funny way. It does become a relationship. And when you live through or reenact, whatever the word is, yes, you're acting it, but in a way it feels like you're living it. You experience those emotions. So in the case of Marie Colvin, we were filming in Jordan, we were reconstructing war zones. A lot of the people I was dealing with and interviewing in the film were, the background cast. They were actually refugees from various war zones. So for them, the experience was real, vivid, lived, and they were reliving it. So yes, I took on a lot, and when I watch that film, my body watches it as something I've lived rather than something I've played in. My heart will start to race again. And with Marie Curie, when I think about Marie Curie's loss, for instance, her loss of her husband, it's incredibly painful to me still. I truly believe that they had an exemplary marriage, one I sort of envy in a way, because I think if you can have this total marriage of heart and soul and mind, and your interests are so harmoniously united that you change the world together. I mean, must be an incredibly potent feeling. And then to lose that person as she did, it's devastating. Another
wonderful love story you're in was A United Kingdom, which feels especially important in these current times. Can you tell us about working on that film?
Doing the film A United Kingdom, opened my eyes an awful lot to questions about race and injustice. And, Amma and David Oyelowo both helped to, I suppose, bring my perspective on, several hundred yards. We all had tremendous admiration for that couple, Ruth Williams and Seretse Khama, in the 40s. I mean, they were pioneering. Look, they changed the face of a country. I really admire Amma because she is one of very few women, first of all, and women of colour in the director's chair, and her experience and journey, it's undoubtedly harder. So, since the murder of George Floyd, as I expect everyone has, I've been trying again to bring my ideas, further up to date and make sure I've penetrated deeper into these questions and tried to learn. And I've, tried to read more books and listen to more first-hand accounts and just made sure that my thinking about these issues is active. I suppose that's the thing. And I don't think just sort of feeling or empathy is enough. It has to be about action too, doesn't it? And it has to be about, I guess one, as a parent, one can start with one's own children, and I've done that. I started having these big conversations with 2 little boys, and I don't think anyone had those conversations with me. And I think it's important that we raise our children differently.
Finally, of course, you were Oscar nominated for Gone Girl, and your character made a fascinating speech about trying to become the cool girl, which has sort of become an iconic speech, really. What kind of responses have you had from women and men to that? Because I think it's become quite familiar and resonated with a lot of people.
It has. I was speaking to somebody yesterday who said that the sort of, the cool girl as a phrase is now synonymous with the way Gillian Flynn intended it. So if somebody says, she's a cool girl, it's not a compliment. It's very loaded. And I think that's interesting that something has sort of entered the zeitgeist.
Nick loved a girl I was pretending to be. Cool girl. Men always use that, don't they? As their defining compliment. She's a cool girl. Cool girl is hot. Cool girl is game. Cool girl is fun. Cool girl never gets angry at her man. She only smiles in a chagrin-loving manner and then presents her mouth for fucking. She likes what he likes. So evidently, he's a vinyl hipster who loves fetish manga. If he likes girls gone wild, she's a mall babe who talks football and endures buffalo wings at Hooters. When I met Nick Dunn, I knew he wanted cool girl. And for him, I'll admit, I was willing to try.
I had a screening of the film last year, towards the end of last year at the BFI. And it was really interesting to see it again. Even just 5 years on, how much our climate and culture of social media and control over one's own image and taking control of the story has, it's come on rapidly, as we all know, in the last 5 years. So suddenly Amy's sort of deviously brilliant playing of the press and public perception was suddenly even more sort of deliciously funny because people understood it in a different way. I could just feel that more people were connected with that notion of manipulating public perception. And especially now we've got this huge culture of likes. It's absurd to me that now the whole world is run. Not only are we trying to move away from likability as the most important thing of a woman, but we're sort of encroached upon by likes from all angles. But if Marie Curie had worried about being liked, she never would have achieved what she did. It's a terrible time waster worrying about being liked, isn't it?
I think Radioactive is the perfect example of that. So thank you so much again for joining Girls on Film at BFI to talk about it. It's such a pleasure to see you. Thank you.
Yeah, nice to see you too on the lovely pink sofa.
Thank you.
All right.
Always a pleasure. Take care. Thanks again. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And next up, as promised, we have Amma Asante, director of A Way of Life, Belle and a United Kingdom, starring Rosamund Pike. Amma, it's great to have you back on Girls on Film. Welcome back.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me, Anna.
As you know, we just had Rosamund Pike on and she had a message for you. Amma Asante is actually coming on the same show as you today.
Oh, no way.
Do you have a message for her?
If Amma was sitting on your sofa right now and we were all in the room together, I'd say, Amma, I've been thinking about you such a lot in the last few days and I've been wanting to call you. So when you've done your version, your segment of the podcast, can we have a conversation, please? Because I've been wanting to call you and I've been thinking about you. So that's what I'd say to her.
Do you have a response?
Of course, yes, of course we can have a chat, Rosamund. I think about you a lot also. I think we had quite an amazing time in Botswana, and I think because we were sort of in our own bubble, if that makes sense, you know, we were miles away from anywhere, and really mostly the only people in the hotel in terms of our crew. We took over a hotel. I think I think our sort of bonding and our and the experience we went through was really quite unique, and you know, I look back on that time fondly also, and I think we all learned a lot. So of course it would be wonderful to chat, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Rosamund also talked to us about the experience of filming in the United Kingdom, and how talking to you and David kind of brought her own perception along, and how she's been thinking, of course, more given recent events, about Black Lives Matter movement. I mean, it's a big topic, but what has your response been to recent events?
Look, I mean, I think we all come at what has been happening and what has been unfolding before our eyes through slightly different gazes. And I think what's really important to me is that where we overlap has to be at the point of humanity, and it has to be at the point of understanding that life is absolutely 100% valuable, and we cannot live in a society where those who are tasked to protect us actually have a dismissive aspect to the context and the value of our lives, which means that sometimes those lives end in their hands and at their hands. And so no matter what gaze we come at this from, I think it's really important that we're united in the idea that everybody's life matters, and at the moment it would seem that Black lives are particularly in danger from those who are tasked to protect us. And so I would ask that everybody get behind the idea that Black lives do matter as well. I mean, the gaze that I come through means that it's extremely traumatic. It's extremely traumatic to have a Black father, to have a Black brother, to know the kind of struggles that we go through every day, most of which are normalized. Most of which are normalized through the system, but to see that, you know, the everyday struggles are sometimes a thin and middle end of a big fat wedge, which can end up in some of the deaths, the many deaths that we've seen recently. And I think we should make no mistake, it's not that they're happening more, it's that video cameras and phones and devices are there to record them. And this has got to be our shame. This has got to be something that we as a society want to eradicate. And any excuses and we didn't see what came before and we didn't see what came after and we don't know what happened here and we don't know what happened there, really those kind of excuses and those kind of reaching, if you like, for reasoning need to be really pushed aside, and we need to just start acting like the evolved country and the evolved set of countries that we say we are.
After Me Too, it struck me how few men were aware of the sexism that women face on a regular basis. And you're talking about everyday racism. And so after Me Too, I wondered if I was equally unaware of the extent of that. And when I spoke to people, I was really shocked, and I realised that I had been. And I'm sure that applies to many underrepresented groups. Do you think we all need to talk more? And if so, what can we ask each other?
Of course, I think you can never talk too much. I'm meek, so always known for talking way too much. So I don't think that there can ever be too much conversation, but I think it's about more than conversation, because I think many of the things that are being expressed today have been expressed before. They've been expressed in the past over and over and over again. And lots of listening has happened in the past. I just don't know how much hearing has actually happened. The thing about privilege is it's much like racism. It's normalized as an everyday thing. So it's very hard to recognize it if you're outside of it. And recognizing your privilege as a white person, recognizing your privilege as a man is I don't think is something that we have to keep on explaining. I think there comes a point where, my first film was about at what point does society's culpability in the way that poverty works against people and the way the class system works, at what point does that meet individual responsibility? And I think we have to ask that question. At what point do we as people of colour and Black people in a society, at what point does our sort of responsibility to you as people who are not Black meet your responsibility to say, look, actually, this is about power. unless we really sort of look at what's going on right at the bottom of any particular food tree that we're looking at, unless we deal with the aspects of those people at the bottom, we're never ever going to be able to solve the real problem, because at some point when you eliminate us, somebody else drops to the bottom, you know?
Yeah.
And you eliminate that group and then somebody else drops to the bottom. So it's really, really about solving the issues from grassroots up, I think.
Many of your films, as you mentioned, including Where Hands Touch, your last film, showed people learning about each other's cultures and tackling their own prejudices. For those who haven't seen Where Hands Touch, could you talk a little bit more about the story? Because it's a fascinating film.
Yeah, so Where Hands Touch really is a story about a 15-year-old girl who was born between the wars, the First World War and the Second World War. And it was an interesting story for me to kind of detail, because when I first discovered that there were people of colour and that there were biracial children that lived under Hitler's rule, my first reaction was, oh my God, they must have been, you know, murdered immediately, or, you know, taken off to camps in the way that Jewish people were. They would have had similar treatment. And what I discovered was that there was something very different occurred for them, which was this sort of being forced into this weird place of not being able to be embraced by the communities that they lived within, but also they weren't completely treated in the ways that Jewish people were treated. They weren't murdered and they weren't sent to camps quite in the same way, but they could have been. So what I mean by they could have been is it's sort of, you meet the wrong SS officer on the wrong day and you are still perceived as other, and something could happen to you. And the reason why it wasn't as straightforward is because their mothers were so-called Aryan women, and usually their fathers were occupation soldiers from the French occupation of Germany from the previous war, who were sometimes no longer in the picture, and meant that they were isolated within the context of their families as being the only black child or the only biracial child. But also, you know, something really important I wanted to look at, Anna, was also the aspect that they were isolated within the context of their community. And what I sort of learned as I was sort of interviewing black survivors and biracial survivors of the Holocaust was that to go through this persecution is horrific. But when you also go through it and you don't have a community to go through it, because I think about what we're talking about today and the racism that I've experienced and the racism that, you know, friends and family have experienced, and I'm grateful for the fact that if I have to experience this, and I wish I didn't, that I had a mother and I had a father who looked like me, and I had friends who understood what that experience was, and I existed within a community. I do exist within a community with whom I can march, with whom there are elders in that community who can guide me, that with other people who absolutely understand the experience because they're going through it too. And what it made me think about as I interviewed many of the Afro-Germans was, what must it be like to go through all of that and not have any community to sort of fall back on and to comfort you and to embrace you. And so that was the really important aspect for me. And the idea that integration is a beautiful thing when you're retiring from the UK and you think, oh, I'm going to go off and live in Spain, or I'm going to go off and live in France. It's a wonderful thing and we deem it as a wonderful thing. But when that integration means that you have to integrate within a community that is completely white and supremacist in its outlook, then, and you have to do it as a form of survival, well, then that integration becomes an act of violence. And that's what I really wanted to look at in the film.
We have a new girl joining us today. Her name is Lena Schlegel. Stand up. Schlegel is a good German name, but your face is so un-German. Lena has facial features in common with people of which continent? Greta.
Africa.
Indeed. So how does a girl like you come to have a name so Germanic as Schlegel?
Schlegel is my mother's name.
And what is your father's name?
finally, Amma, you were very inspiring when you came on Girls on Film before at the Albright Club. The audience loved you. What is the best advice that you can give to women trying to tell stories through cinema, and particularly women of colour, perhaps, whatever side of the camera they're on?
Well, I think my real advice has always been, and still is, just do it. And what does that mean? Well, that means, you know, when I started out, we didn't have devices that had cameras on them where you could just literally pick up your iPad or your phone. We didn't have, you know, apps and devices that allowed you to be able to edit your own work. I think it's really important to, whatever device you can find to shoot on, whether you can access, you know, a proper camera, or whether it's just something you do on your phone, find like-minded people who want to also tell stories. So if you're not a writer but you're a director, find a great writer who sort of, you know, sees the world in a similar way that you do. You know, find someone who's in art and design and wants to production design or costume design, or a great makeup artist, and pull together your team and then just do it. And then, you know, decide what you want to do with that piece of work. Is it something that you want to send to a film festival and use it as a calling card in that way? And if you do, don't put it on YouTube first, because they often want, you know, world premieres. And if that's not something, if you think you're not at that point yet, but you know, but you still want to show it off, then put it on your YouTube channel. Put, you know, a piece of it on your IGTV, or all of it on your IGTV, but get it out there. And also, it's so easy now to send digital work. You know, send it to producers whose work you love, whose work you've watched on screen, and you know, send it across them and say, hey, have a look at this, and you know, this is a short that I've done, but maybe I've got a script in the drawer, or I'm working with somebody on this idea, and you know, am I someone who might interest you? But don't wait. I mean, I think the best advice I ever got is that door really does not open from the outside. You've got to be the person who opens the door and steps out. So as frightening as it is, and as many no's as, you know, you'll get, it is a numbers game. You know, the more no's you hear, the more likely you are to eventually get a yes, and you actually only need one to get your career started. So do it, just do it.
That's brilliant advice, and you're living proof of that. Amma Asante, thank you so much for joining us on Girls on Film.
Thank
Lovely
you.
to see you.
It's been such a pleasure again. Thank you so much.
Now you can see United Kingdom on the BFI player now. My final guest is an actor called Nichola Burley. You may recognise her from Downton Abbey, StreetDance 3D, or Catch Me Daddy. She's starring in a new film alongside Roxanne Scrimshaw. It's called Lynn and Lucy by Faisal Boulafer. She plays a mother who loses her young child. Well, Nichola Burley, welcome to Girls on Film.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's so lovely to have you here. I'm such a fan of your work, and I saw Lynn and Lucy at BFI LFF and I was floored by it. It obviously starts a very powerful story of female friendship, and it takes on a very dark and thought-provoking turn. Difficult to talk about without spoilers, but what kind of subjects did it make you think about as a performer?
You know, it honestly encompassed a lot for me. I think it made me think about society and how judgmental we are, and how we have these preconceived notions and ideas about how people should be and the way they should react and the things that they should think and feel, which are completely unjustified a lot of the time. Quite poignant to what's going on in the world today.
It is a very intense film. I absolutely loved it. May I ask how it felt to make it as a mother?
Really scary, if I'm being honest. I had to leave them at home with my husband, and then obviously playing this woman whose story is very tragic and she loses her child. I knew going into it that I had to be really prepared. Then there was the things about getting my hair shaved off. So I thought, when my children, I thought, how are they going to see me? How will I respond? You can't really explain to a 1-year-old what that will look like, or what that might, how will she recognize me? How will she respond? But the most difficult thing was I remember the scene when the ambulance came, and I'd kind of got myself into a bit of a state, and I remember walking down the stairs, seeing the ambulance, and I just froze. And then they brought out it was a doll. It was a weighted doll, but it was all wrapped up. I was shaking. I was just shaking, crying, and we weren't even called to set yet. I feel like I would be doing people very wrong, and I wouldn't be justifying any of the story if I didn't try to understand what that felt like, and it was horrific.
Lucy.
You have your hair cut for real, as you mentioned in the film, and I was really interested to look at your Instagram account, and you said that you were forced to question your femininity because of your haircut, because of some people's reactions. Tell us more about that.
So loads of people had these really odd reactions. Obviously, my family knew about it beforehand. There's such an emphasis on this for women that I didn't know what I'd do without all of that. I didn't know how people would look at me or treat me differently, and I didn't know how feminine I would feel. The in-between stage, so where you see Lucy when she walks out the salon, I stayed like that for 3 days until we shot the last scene. So I had really long bits, really shaved bits. I remember going to the hotel room that night and feeling quite safe, actually, in that set, in that world. Everyone knows what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. But I remember going and opening the hotel room door to get food, and the person looked at me. I forgot that I didn't have anything on my hair, and the person looked at me really shocked. And in that moment, I remember sitting down on the floor, and I just cried. I just sobbed, and I thought, this is insane. I didn't know that would be people's reactions. Now, of course, I wasn't acknowledging that it was neither long nor short. It was just it was completely butchered. But that was my first recognition from anyone outside of the world. And then the next day I was sort of wearing turbans and wrapping it up. And I remember on the third day I went to the hairdressers, and I was like, right, get it really short. I want the shortest bit. I want it all down. So I was just, it was like a number one, basically. And he was like, okay, we're going to sass this up now. What we're having. And we went for this sort of really bright, bold blonde. And I walked out of that hairdresser's, and I never felt so amazing. Truthfully, not for getting glammed up, not anything else. I walked out. Suddenly I felt like I was stronger. I felt really empowered. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to rely on feminine charm. I didn't have to rely on trying to look pretty. I just was what I was. And I had more face than I ever realised. I couldn't hide from anything. And it was amazing. I felt stronger in myself than I ever did before.
Lynn, do you ever wonder, like...
What?
I don't know, do you ever wonder if you'd be able to love him?
Harrison? Luce, no one said it'd be easy.
And now you've starred in several dance films, including Soul Boy and Street Dance 3D, which in 2010 became the first British film to be shot in 3D, I believe. I wanted to touch on it because some of it was filmed on the South Bank near the British Film Institute. What are your memories of filming that, particularly in that location?
It was all lovely. I think, honestly, I think for me it felt like home, and London's not my home. I'm not from there, but it feels like a home. Having something at home and feeling really proud to kind of go, we can do this as well, because we always identify those things with being in America. So to have our landmarks, to see things that are big for us represented on a huge cinema screen, that's a really amazing feeling. And to also be at the forefront, as you say, the first British 3D film was, I don't think I realised the enormity of it at the time. I was just like, I'm getting to dance. This is like living my dream. I'm that child in my bedroom, except it's being filmed.
Now, as you know, I've been looking at your Instagram account, and I've noticed that you've been speaking out against racism and the fact that your husband has been targeted by police. Do you feel that people need to talk more about these sort of things and share these unfortunate stories more?
Enormously, yeah. I think so my husband's mixed race. His mum's English from Bolton, his dad's Jamaican from Kingston. When I first got with my husband, so we've been together 14 years now, I remember driving with him in the car and continually getting pulled over and just sort of being like, this is really odd. Does this happen in Birmingham? Because I'm from Leeds originally. So I was just like, is this a Birmingham thing? I don't. And they would never have a basis to stop. They'd obviously never find anything in the car. And at one point, this happened 8 times in 2 months. And I had to write to police and make a formal report. And then it stopped. He's had so much racism against him. My child, when he was 3, one of his friend said to him, "Is this where you live?" And his friend came over for dinner, and he said, "Yeah," sort of all excited. And his friend said, "Is this where you hide?" And I just sort of stopped, and I was thinking, this is a little bit odd. And he said, "Is this where you hide from my mummy and daddy because they don't like you, do they, because you're brown?" And I just filled up, and I looked at my son, who's 3, and he sat in the back of the car, and it really hurts to see that. Even now, I don't understand it. And I think a 3-year-old having to sit there and question, am I wrong because I'm brown? Am I hiding because I'm brown? Is this where we live? And all of these questions were something that he started to ask me, and I just had to very firmly reassure him and have a word with the parents. And in that instance, the parents were so apologetic. They didn't know where it came from. They couldn't do enough to apologise. But I just thought, I never imagined at 3 he would witness that. The discrimination that my husband faces on a daily basis is extremely shocking. He would sit with white colleagues and have someone say, "Oh, I've got this joke, it's a bit racist, you don't mind me saying it, do you?" And that thing's not uncommon at all. He had someone once say to him, his name's Junior, he had someone say, "Do you mind if I don't call you Junior, if I call you something else, because that name sounds a bit like I'm black and proud?" Someone asked him that question, and I was just like, I don't understand. I understand people are obviously very wary of protest during the pandemic, but I mean, I think that it should speak volumes that people want to raise their voice and be heard in that situation. I'm really hopeful that there's going to be positive change going forward. I kind of, when you feel like I feel it, I've never experienced anything like this in my lifetime.
I, despite the terrible things that are going on, I share your optimism that finally the conversation is getting louder, and I hope that it's just not going to go away until the problem is solved.
It's exciting to me to hear news talking about it, to hear news speaking to people who are mixed race and black and saying, "What's your experience? What does this feel like?" That's amazing. If more of that happened, people who perhaps felt scared to speak to people, how could I help you? What could I do? I think the more that media particularly opens that door, people will feel more comfortable going forward and want to, if they don't understand, they'll want to seek the wisdom and knowledge to understand, and they'll want to do whatever they can to help.
Nichola, any last message for the Girls on Film viewers watching this at home?
I really just want to say thank you for everybody's support, and I hope you enjoy Lynn and Lucy. Please spread the word. Obviously, we're all at home at the moment. We can't go to the cinemas and watch it, but this is an incredible film. Thank you to the BFI for putting it out there for people to see, and I really hope that it gets the viewers that it deserves and that people take many messages away from it.
Amen to that. Thank you so much, Nichola. Thanks for joining Girls on Film.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was Nichola Burley. Lynn and Lucy will premiere on demand on BFI Player's subscription service on the 2nd of July. You've been watching Girls on Film with me, Anna Smith. If you've enjoyed today's show, then do check out the podcast on your usual app, and the link is also below the screen right here. There are 37 episodes of fun feminist film chat to catch up on. Do follow us on Twitter at girlsonfilm_pod, and don't forget to support the BFI if you can by donating £5. Text BFI at home to 70085. It costs £5 plus one standard message rate. Thanks to the BFI for having us today, and to Heather Archbold from HLA Productions. Stay safe, everyone, and see you next time for Girls on Film.